Go with me to Ephesians 6:10 through 13. Finally, my brethren, be strong. Now, this is not a suggestion, it is a commandment that he's given. Finally, my brethren, be strong in Almighty Yahweh and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of Yahweh that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places. Therefore take up the whole armor of Yahweh that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and when having done all to stand, that we can stand. Hallelujah. We wrestle against spiritual wickedness, every one of us. We have so many temptations. Who do you think brings the temptations to us? It's not Almighty Yahweh. He does not tempt us. The temptations come from the evil one, and he uses our flesh to do that. And the only way we can have victory over that is to separate ourselves from the influence of the flesh that is in carnality against the spiritual. We need to understand that there is a reason that Paul told us to take on the whole armor of Almighty Yahweh. There is a reason. I think far too many times it goes to the back of our mind of the battle that we're in, and we're not aware of the battle that we're in. We're not aware of the combat that we're in. Every day when we walk through life, we are in combat with the enemy. We are in combat with the wicked one. And we let down our armor, we let down our protection, and we don't stay up with the word and with the Ruach HaKodesh, and we get behind. And when we get behind, we have just like it's just like a soldier that was in the Roman army. He had all of his armor on. While he laid down at night, he might take his armor off, and guess what? That's the very time the enemy wants to hit him, isn't it? When his armor is off. Listen to me, when you relax and let down your guard and let down your armor, that's when you are going to be attacked. The devil is not going to attack you when you're strong in the armor of Almighty Yahweh, the word of truth, and the helmet of salvation. He is not going to attack you when you are walking in these things. This is not when he wants to come against you. When he wants to come against you is when things are not going right and your mind gets to wandering and you get a little depressed and you get a little defocused and you get sideways with your scriptures. You know, we need to understand that the Father has given us clear instruction. He's given us understanding, and Saul was a strong picture of that. Here he was in a dark cell, you know, in the very time that the night before he was executed. The night before he was executed, he was sitting there in that cell, and I'm quite sure looking at the rock that he knew his head was going to fall off of the next day when they cut it off. But yet, He stayed faithful. He was a faithful witness till the very end. How do you do that? You cannot do that in the flesh, in the carnality. I'm warning you tonight that if you do not get in the spiritual, deep in the spiritual, that you will not be able to withstand when that day comes. That even though you think you've got it made and you think that you're walking right, if you aren't right with the Father, if you aren't right spiritually, if you aren't spiritually strong, you're not going to be able to stand in that day. And I think that's a serious thing that we all ought to think about, because I know that that day is going to be great trials such as never has been since the beginning of time. Think about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It's going to be greater than that. Think about Daniel in the lion's den. It's going to be tougher than that. We have to understand that we have to prepare, and the Father has given us a way to prepare. He has given us instruction, He has given us direction, and He has given us correction. It is up to us to consume that and take it on and have it a part of our being, that our spirit is strengthened by it. You know, it don't matter how much word you know. What matters is how much word you're doing. And it don't matter how much word you know. It matters how much of that word you are taking for a fact. And we know that we have been warned so many times all through the scriptures, not just through Thessalonians or some of the others, but we were warned through Matthew 24. We were warned of the great tribulation that's coming, a time of trying like there has never been before. And we know that Yeshua went for 40 days without eating or drinking. And that is physically impossible. You cannot go 40 days without water, without dying in the natural. But he had something more working for him than just the natural, just the flesh. Almighty Yahweh had His hand of protection around him. He had a purpose for him. And I'm telling you tonight that Almighty Yahweh has His hand of protection around you. He's got a purpose for you in this life. Before you leave this life, the purpose in this life is not just to eat, drink, be happy, and then when the end comes, okay, we'll go. That's not the purpose. The Father has a purpose for you in His kingdom. He has something set aside for you to do. He has called you to it. He has appointed you to it. And you are to be faithful in that area, or else you are in disobedience. Paul was physically, in this day and time, we can't imagine. But Paul was physically bound with chains. He was bound with chains in the darkest part, the lowest part of the prison. And yet his spirit was up. He did not get down with it. If we look at the whole letter that we are reading from tonight, was to encourage the church, to instruct them, to get them focused on the absolute surety of the Word. That the Word was not just words written on paper, it was from the Creator of heaven and earth that would care for you, that would protect you, that would direct you. But you have to be faithful. People, you have to stay faithful to the Father to reap His benefits. You have to be faithful to Him, to His covenant, to His word. And here in this congregation, there is no reason for anybody not to know the Torah of Almighty Yahweh. It's been taught, it's been taught, and it's been taught. So we should know the Torah of Almighty Yahweh. And if we know it, that's not going to be the end of it. To know it and not do it puts you in rebellion. To know it and to do it puts you in submission and in covenant with the Father. That means his hand of protection will be around you. That don't mean nothing bad will ever happen, but that means that you will be able to overcome all the things that come against you. You will be able to overcome them. Paul was telling us. Now you hear people talk about you don't give the enemy no credit, don't give him no credit. Let me tell you something. The worst thing you can do in a fight, and believe me, I know this, in my younger years, I was quite a scrapper. The worst thing you can do in a fight is underestimate your enemy. To think he's less than he is. And I believe most of the church today does not take into account the power that Satan has. And that's a contradiction to the word. The word talks about power, talks about dunamis power. And it equates that with Satan, dunamis power. We have to understand that we are not dealing with flesh and blood, but we are dealing with spiritual darkness, rulers of darkness, spiritual wickedness in high places. And he has a goal set forth in his head and mind. He has a goal that he is not going to vary from. The only way he'll vary from it is if you come against him with the word of Almighty Yahweh and that precious Kadosh name of Yeshua HaMashiach, then you can move him. But if you come against him with the word and the name of Yeshua HaMashiach and you aren't walking in the word, it is not going to have any effect. Do you hear what I'm saying? And that's where much of the church is today. They believe they can just say the name of Jesus and everything's going to move, which is not even the right name. And live any way they want to live, and the Father will just accept them and take everything away from them. In a physical battle, there is no time that you put down your weapons. When you lay down to sleep at night, your rifle is right by your side where you can get a hold of it. You do not get away from your weapons, under no circumstances. Your life depends on it. And in the kingdom of Yahweh, you do not get away from your weapons or your protection. Having your waist girded with the truth and your feet with the preparation, sandals of the preparation of the gospel. We need to understand. We need to understand that we have to walk, if we are going to walk in the protection of Almighty Yahweh, we have got to keep our armor on. The breastplate of righteousness. What is the breastplate of righteousness? That's walking according to the commandments in the blood of Yeshua HaMashiach. That is the breastplate of righteousness. That is your protection. That protects your heart. That protects your heart and your chest and all your vitals. The helmet of salvation, what does that protect? That protects your mind, your brain, your thoughts. We need to be aware of all the efforts of the enemy. We go back all the way to Genesis when the angels came down and had sexual relationship with the women on earth, and they brought forth babies that were not the intention of Almighty Yahweh. They were Nephilims. They were giants. And the giants inhabited this world. There's even records of them with the enemy, with the Indians, I mean. Pardon me. The Indians give us records of the Nephilim, of them eating them, being carnivores and devouring the Indians. It is so out of our understanding in many cases to what depth the evil goes to and to how we have to fight it. We get caught so many times with our hands down and a relaxed position, not looking for anything bad, and all of a sudden it comes upon us. It says, stand, therefore, having your waist girded with the truth, always in the truth. That's the only way you can stand, in the truth. Not in traditions of the church, not in denominational traditions, but the truth of Almighty Yahweh. That is the only way you can stand. But let me tell you tonight, let me reassure you that if you stand in the truth, you are going to stand. There's not anything that's going to be able to move you if you stand in the truth. But if you stand in traditions of men, traditions of Christianity, traditions of church, you are not going to be able to stand. You are going to falter. You are going to fail. You have to stand in the truth of Almighty Yahweh. And the truth of Almighty Yahweh is the word of Almighty Yahweh through Yeshua HaMashiach. So we have to understand, and we have to stand having our waist girded with the truth, not being movable, not being wish-washy, but stand with our waist being girded with the truth. There are brethren that are beaten and bruised and laying in the ditch because they have trusted for years in the traditions of the church and the traditions of men. And many times we fail to be the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan, when he walked by the person that was bleeding and bruised and laying in the ditch, he was the one that was rejected by all of the Jews. They would have nothing to do with him. Yet he reached down and picked up this Jewish man and carried him to be cared for. We need to be good Samaritans. We need to quit walking by those who are wounded and bleeding and have been wounded and bleeding by the wicked one that continues to beat and to put them in bondage, and they have no hope of getting out without Yeshua HaMashiach. Do we love them? Do we care for them? We cannot let the discouragement or the accusations halt us or falter us. We have to be faithful to the word of Almighty Yahweh. And we have to care enough to pick them up out of the ditch and carry them where they can be cared for. And I'm talking about where they can be taught the word of Yahweh, because the reason they're beaten, bruised, and bleeding is because they did not have the word to protect them. We need to understand that we have to have compassion on one another. We have to have it. If we aren't measuring up to what the Father requires us to be, then our prayers should be located, focused in that area. Father, help us. Father, strengthen us. Father, give us knowledge and understanding. And we need to do everything we can to bring that about in our life. The Father can bring you to be what He wants you to be. You're not something, none of you are anything that's been thrown away. You are the wonderful creation of Almighty Yahweh. No matter what you think about yourself, you are the creation, wonderful creation of Almighty Yahweh. He did not create any junk. He created truth. And you are what He created. You were created to walk in truth. You were not created to falter, to fail, to wander around. You were created to walk in truth. You know, Paul was not occupied with his wounds or his hurts and what was going on with him. He had a higher calling than that. He had a higher goal than that. And he had to love Yahweh for those who are wounded and hurt. Because even while he was in the dark prison, he wrote letters of hope and encouragement to the people on the outside. He was not so occupied with life itself and self-indulgence that he couldn't minister, even though he wasn't so focused on his pains and his discomforts that he could not minister. He was staying faithful to Almighty Yahweh. And everything that he said and did, he was staying faithful to Almighty Yahweh. So being girded with the truth, stand therefore, Ephesians 6:14, stand therefore, having girded your waist with the truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace, above all taking the shield of faith, with which you will be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Yahweh, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, being watchful to this end with all perseverance and supplication for all the saints, and for me, the utterance may be given to me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel. Now here is Paul, this faithful man that has preached with all kinds of persecution, saying, pray for me, that I may open my mouth, that I won't be intimidated. We have to understand that none of us are so righteous that we are past intimidation and past being stopped or being shut up. We have to be focused on the Word. In the natural, we do not have the power to fight the wicked one. We have to understand that we must be prepared at all times. Do not lay your weapons down. You keep them on you at all times. Do not be caught without the whole armor of Yahweh about you day and night. A good and faithful church member with all the while ignoring others' needs is not where the Father wants you. There are so many that are faithful to the church and the church teachings, the church tradition, the church doctrines, but they have not got a clue of what they need to do to be right with Almighty Yahweh. They are right with men, right with the church, but they have missed totally what it takes to be converted. They talk about conversion, but too many times they're not converted at all. And if they are converted, they're converted to the doctrines of the church rather than the word of Almighty Yahweh. We have to understand that there's not two sets of rules or two sets of principles. There's one. And that's the one we will walk in if we are going to be able to have fellowship with Almighty Yahweh. And that's what it's all about, people. We talk about heaven and hell, but I mean, we need fellowship with Almighty Yahweh while we're here on this earth. We got to get through the nasty now and now before we get to the sweet by and by. And the only way we're going to get through the nasty now and now successfully is by the Ruach HaKodesh and the power of Almighty Yahweh and our obedience to Him. My precious friend, there are many wounded and dying, not only in the ditch, but the church also. I know my hope and my prayer is that the Father will have mercy on all those who have been taught less than what they're supposed to be or been given a different measure. Even though the Father said He set a measuring chain, a plumb line, that we were to measure up to. I am praying for grace for all those who are in the traditional church that are ignoring His covenant, His commandments. I'm praying for all of them. My mother and daddy was part of that, and I'm praying for them. But I personally don't know how it's going to end, because there's a lot of scriptures that gives you understanding that they're on thin ice. So we need to pray for our brothers and sisters, and we need to be able to give them instruction, correction, and reproof, that not be able to not be backing off or not being intimidated by harsh words or accusations. We need to be faithful to the word of Yahweh, because it's not going to be man that judges us when we get there. It's going to be Yeshua HaMashiach, the word of Almighty Yahweh made flesh. My precious friend, there are so many wounded and dying in the ditch. And just because you have armor on doesn't mean you won't suffer. Even the soldier who had all the armor on many times was wounded. So just because you have the armor on don't mean you won't suffer any wounds or any pains. But it means He cannot take your life, your spiritual life, your Ruach HaKodesh life with Almighty Yahweh. He cannot take your life. Your armor will protect your life. But it doesn't mean that you won't have any pain or anything that will try to hinder you. It just means that He cannot take your life. Your life is protected by the armor of Almighty Yahweh. We are to walk as He walked, not letting discomfort rule our walk. Saul understood. Ambassador for gospel representing Yeshua. He was the ambassador for Yeshua. He understood that he was a witness that would draw people to Yeshua or push them away. I wish that the church understood that today. I wish that they understood that their actions are either going to draw people to Yeshua and Almighty Yahweh or push them away from them. You know, how many times have you actually been involved with a Christian who had lost his cool or gone goofy or whatever, you know, and strayed from the word? You know, how many times have you seen that happen? And you know that this is not what the Father intended. It's not what he intended. He didn't intend for Christians to go out and get drunk. He didn't intend for Christians to go out and commit adultery and, oh, well, it'll be forgiven me. He did not mean that. And it does not mean that. It means that, and when I'm saying this, I'm not by any way thinking there's anybody in here that's committing adultery. So don't think that. But these words go much further than in this congregation here. They go much further over the YouTube. We have to understand that we are guided by the Word. We are directed by the Word. We are instructed by the Word. That is our guidelines. That is our direction. And that is where we are headed. That's the path we have to walk on. We have to walk on the path of righteousness. Ephesians 6:20. For which I am an ambassador in chains, and that it may speak boldly as I ought to speak. We need to understand that probably, most likely, the most influential revelations that you will have, or testimony, witness that you will have, is when you are bound up with all kinds of persecutions, yet you stay faithful to Almighty Yahweh. You stay faithful to the Word. You stay faithful to what He has called you to. That is the most powerful witness that you are going to have, the most powerful testimony that you're going to have. When you keep moving and keep doing the things that you need to do, even though you are bound with whatever. We understand that. Even in my chains, Paul was saying, I'm still responsible for my actions. Even when temptations and trials come upon you so heavy that it feels like it's just hard to survive them, you are still responsible for your actions. Now, our sovereign is not estranged from us. It is not that he is not aware of our trials and all the temptations that comes upon us, but he is able to give you the strength and power to overcome them, and be victorious in them. And Paul was saying, I'm an ambassador in chains, but see, that in it I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. Even in my chains, I'm still responsible for my actions. Conditions of life are not to control our actions or our attitudes. Conditions of this life are not to control our actions or our attitudes in any way. Our attitude should be the same. Yes, we can be heavy, but it does not have to control our actions. Even Yeshua, when he was praying in the garden, he told his disciples, his spirit was heavy, that he was heavy. He knew what he was going to have to face. And how could you jump up and down and clap your hands about that? I mean, there was no way. His spirit was heavy. We are royal guards of the Torah. We are instructed to guard the Torah. And there's never been a time in the history of this world that the Torah needs guarding more than it does today. I mean, there are attacks against the Torah, the commandments of Yahweh, walking in the Sabbath keeping is even under attack in so many ways. We need to understand that we are the guards of the way that the Father has set up. He has given us the responsibility and the power to guard His Torah, and He has instructed us to guard His Torah. That is our responsibility. That's not His responsibility. He gave us the power to guard the Torah, instructed us to guard the Torah, and commended us to guard the Torah. So it is our responsibility. And I'm going to tell you, when you hear somebody put down Shabbat or the Torah and you stay quiet, you have agreed with them. You are not to be in agreement with them. I'm going to tell you, every time I have gone to the hospital, those nurses have got more instruction probably than they've ever gotten in church. Because I believe you're supposed to be faithful whatever situation you're in. I believe you're supposed to be faithful. And Paul believed that. He says, pray for me that in my chains I won't slow down none. Therefore, we need the whole armor of Yahweh, not traditions. I mean, you look at those who are guarding the castle, or those who are guarding the president, or those who are guarding the Pope. They all have armor on. Even the guards that guard the president, they have armor on. They have the bulletproof vest on. That's what the armor was in the old time, that it was to reject the sword or the spear and be able to deflect it. And the bulletproof vest is be able to stop the bullet. Now, agreed, there's some bullets that won't stop, but it is set to stop the normal bullet. There's a set of bullets called cop killers that it won't stop. Therefore, we need the whole armor of Yahweh and not the traditions of the church. Now, don't misunderstand me. There's some truth that has come forth out of the church, and the main truth is that you have to accept Yeshua HaMashiach as your Savior, and that to be cleansed from your sin. That's the main truth, but that's not the whole truth. There is more truth to that. You have to walk in truth. You have to walk in covenant with Almighty Yahweh. You have to walk in obedience to Almighty Yahweh. That is our calling, and that's where our victory is. We need to understand that we are in the battle every day of our life. There's no days off, no weekends off. We are in a battle every day of our life. But thank Yahweh that if we stay faithful and we walk in His covenant, we will have victory in those battles. Sometimes it seems awful close, but we will have victory in those battles. There is no earthly fight that you are guaranteed to win. You have to walk in covenant with Almighty Yahweh in order to have the victory over all the trials and tribulations that come against us. You cannot do it on your own. You have to have obedience to Almighty Yahweh to be able to overcome the enemies of Yahweh. It's a strong challenge that has been given to us. It's a strong direction. In here, we are not church members. We are the army of Almighty Yahweh. We are the soldiers in the fight. And we have to have our armor on. There's a reason that Paul commanded us to put on the whole armor of Yahweh, because you can't stand without it. You get in all these natural things, all these church traditions, and all the man things, you can't stand there. They have no power against the wicked one. You have to work with your life and stay committed to Almighty Yahweh and His Word in order to be able to succeed. Listen, Hebrews 12:18 through 21. For you have not come to mountain that may not be touched, and that burned with fire, and to blackness and darkness and tempest, and the sound of the trumpet and the voice of the word, so that those who heard it begged that if the word should not be spoken to them any more, for they could not endure what was commanded. And if so much as a beast touches the mountain, it shall be stoned, or shot with an arrow. And so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I am exceedingly afraid and trembling. Now, this is what I'm saying to you tonight, that by the blood of Yeshua HaMashiach, we are granted to come into fellowship with Almighty Yahweh. We are granted to come to His throne and to speak to Him face to face. We are granted the ability to talk to Him. Almighty Yahweh gave His Son, that His Son would give us access to the throne room and that would cleanse us from sin. So when we come to Almighty Yahweh, we don't have to fear death, because we come into His presence. In the Old Testament of the Torah, when the men came before Almighty Yahweh, it was only one time a year, and that was only the high priest. Common people of Israel and Judea was not allowed to come before Almighty Yahweh lest they die. We have to understand that this is no small thing that Yeshua did for us. He gave us access to the Father. He gave us access to the Torah. He gave us access to the Ruach HaKodesh to guide, direct us, and correct us. And He gave us access to the whole armor of Almighty Yahweh, that we could fight the fight and not be unprotected, that we would be protected by the whole armor of Almighty Yahweh. The helmet of salvation keeps our mind clear and straight and focused on the Father. I'm not saying that don't have struggles. We have struggles. Paul had struggles. Peter had struggles. John had struggles. John was supposedly was boiled in a barrel of oil and survived. And that's just, that has to be supernatural. That cannot be just physical. But that gives us an understanding of what the Father can do. But almost all of those apostles and disciples experienced death by the government or by the religious system. Almost all of them. And here we today have the ability to come before the Father and worship together as a group without the fear of somebody coming and kicking the door in and taking us out in the street and shooting us. But too many times we are so unconcerned about it. I think, Father Yahweh, that is not the case for the majority of this congregation. That we deem our time before the Father as important. And I know that some of the things that I teach tonight you've heard over and over. Repetition don't hurt nothing. We learn by repetition. And things are anchored in us by repetition. So I pray that the Father gives us what He wants us to have. Not the messages of man, but what He wants us to have. And I believe and I trust Him to do that. I believe He has done that. I thank the Father for Roger and the others, Craig that's taught. I thank the Father that He's given us that ability here in this place. It's precious. It's precious.